Hi everyone. I'm going to give you an introduction into what's referred to as code first development. This is as opposed to database first development is where you have the model you have the database itself, and you can create a model from the database and get going, building an application. But today, we're going to turn that upside down. We're going to build a model in our application. It will be a conceptual model, and we will generate, or the application basically will generate the database for us automatically. What I want to model today is this. I'm going to model, I'll just bring a notepad here. I want to model an NHL team, okay, where we have a bunch of teams, and every team has a bunch of players. The code for that, I have it in here. So if you want to look at what the player looks like, this is the player class. This is what the player looks like, and the team looks like this. We have every team has a team name, a province, and perhaps a salary cap. Maybe I'll just get rid of the salary cap to keep it simple, so we don't have to type too much. So let's start a new project, and I'm going to start is an ASP.NET MVC project. Here I'm going to call the application code first primer. And I'm going to choose this template, the MVC template. So I'm going to add my models under the models folder. So I'll create a new folder here, and I'll just simply call it the NHL. And I'm going to add two classes here. The team class and the player class. Now for the team class, I'm going to snag the code from here. Let's resolve these. Now before I do resolve this, in order to indicate that a specific column is to be a primary key, you can, if you want to, qualify it with this key keyword. When I say you can, if you want to, there are certain rules that we need to follow. And I will show you that rule when it comes to the player. But as far as the team is concerned, sure enough, we want to make this a key. So we qualify it with this annotation, and we want it to have a maximum length of 30. So let's resolve these. So it's got a team name, a city, a province. Now what is this? This indicates that the team has a relationship with players, and one team can have multiple players. So this one-to-many kind of relationship is indicated with this. So we're done with the team. Let's grab the player. Let me grab this code and put it here. Now I'm going to delete these just to keep it simple. So our player has a jersey number. Instead of jersey number, I might decide to call this player ID. It means the same thing. Now, there is a convention in code first development. If you call a field, if you name a field by the class name followed by the word ID, it automatically makes it a key. And if it's a numeric field, like this one is an integer, no, this one we'll make it an integer. Let's make it an integer. If you make it an integer, it becomes an identity field in SQL Server, and an identity field is a primary key that is auto-incremented. So in order to make it a primary key, you have to give it the name of the class followed by the ID, or you can simply call it ID. In these two cases, you don't need to qualify it with the key annotation. But if you decide to use another primary key name, like jersey number, then you need to qualify it. So I like to call it this way, player ID. It's somewhat logical. Now, this model or this class, it's got a primary key player ID, it's got a last name. Maybe we should give it a first name. Okay, last name, let's give it a first name. A position and a salary. Let's get rid of the salary for the moment to make it easier. Now, the player also has a relationship with the team. If you remember, in the team entity, the team name is the primary key. Therefore, in the player entity, the team name is a foreign key. So you have to specify the foreign key here. And you have to also specify the object that it is related to. So these two together, they make up a semblance of a foreign key. Now let us compile this. The next step is to do this. With Entity Framework, you need to have a context class. This Entity Framework context class, it is the entry point into your Entity Framework model. So I'm going to create a new folder here, and I'm going to call it data. And in this data folder, I'm going to add a new class, and I shall call this the NHL context. It's going to be a context class. Going to add. Now this context class, it has to inherit from the DB context class. This will not be known until I resolve it. So when I resolve it, it will be known. Now you have to add a constructor here. And this constructor has to somehow indicate the connection string that it's going to use to talk to the database. If you want to see how the already existing context class looks like, there is one in here called the identity model. In this identity model class, there's another context close the application called the application DB context. And if you look at this one, this context class, it inherits from the base class and it passes the default connection to the base class. So let us take this one and just use the same concept down here, and we don't really need to have this other argument. So what is this saying? This is saying that we have a context class and it's going to use this connection string. Where is this connection string? The connection string is in our web.config file. If we open that, we should see the default connection. The default connection is going to create a database in our app data directory. It's going to use LocalDB, and I may decide to make this a shorter name. So instead of having this long name, I might just call it NHL. Now this applies to the file name. The actual database name is this other long name, which I'll also call NHL. Just makes things simpler. And I'm going to close this and save it. Now, in this class, this is the constructor. We need to also tell it about the tables that it should be creating in the database. And the way to do that is this. We're going to define a DB set of type team, and that collection we're going to call teams. This needs to be resolved. So here I'm saying that in my database I have a collection of team objects. I want you pretty much to create a table called teams. And I'll do the same thing for players. And that one I want to call it players. Okay? This is all the coding that you need to do in order to define the entities that you want Entity Framework to create for you in the database. Now, in Visual Studio, we have a console window called the Package Manager console. And it is nothing but a PowerShell window inside of Visual Studio. So this console, you can get to it by choosing Tools, NuGet Package Manager, and here it is. It's the Package Manager console. Let's get into there. You get this window here. Okay. Now in this window, just to show you that this is nothing but a PowerShell window, I can come here and execute a PowerShell command, which is get process. And it will just give you all the processes that are running on your machine. We're going to use the Package Manager console to execute some migration commands. Because I like to keep these migration commands documented in my project, what I tend to do is create a folder here in my project, which I will call docs. And in that docs folder, I'm going to create a text file called migrations. So I'm just filtering on text file, and I'm going to create a text file called migrations. And I'll slowly sort of build these commands and put them here. The reason I put them in a text file is because I want to be able to reuse them over and over again. These are the commands that we will need to do our migrations. The first command is enable migration. And you're supposed to point it to the context type that we have. The context type that we have is not courses.context, it is actually NHL.context. Where does that name come from? It is this name here. And the migrations directory, this switch determines where you want the migrations to happen. And I'm going to get it to happen in the NHL folder under migrations. So I'm going to copy all of this and I'll paste it inside of this package manager console. And let's see what happens. Okay, it's done. When it's done, you will notice in our project it created a migrations folder and underneath that an NHL folder. And this is exactly what I asked it to do. And in there it created a configuration file. What's in this configuration file? This configuration file basically is the class that's going to manage our migrations. And it will be apparent in a short while. It also contains a seed method. And in here there is some sample code on how you can go about seeding some dummy data. Because always developers, they want to have dummy data so that they can build their application with it. They want to list information, they want to edit information, and so on and so forth. So you have an opportunity here to create some dummy data, and we will do that in a moment. Now the next command is to add a migration. Now this add migration takes a switch configuration type name, and the value for that switch is the fully qualified class of this configuration class that was created. So the fully qualified name for this configuration class would be the namespace plus configuration. Copy this namespace, come here and paste it instead of this. So I'm going to add a migration against this class, and I will give the migration a name. This migration name is just so that you can keep track of what it is that you're doing. It is equivalent to, for example, if you're pushing a new version of your software into GitHub, you give that commit a name. And this is the same thing here. In this case, I'm calling it initial create. I could have called it migration number 1 or the first migration or something like that. So I'm going to take this one, copy it, and paste it here. Okay, that was pretty fast. What did it do? It created another file here, and notice the name we gave it, this initial create, just stuck it in as the name of the migration. What's interesting is what's in this file. There are two methods in this file. There is the up method that creates the tables in the database, and there's the down method that tears it down or it rolls it back. Let's look up the up method. The up method has two create table commands. This kind of code is called fluid APIs, and it's the code that essentially creates the database. You will see here that the player ID is going to be made into an identity column. The primary key is player ID, and then there's a foreign key that points towards the team's entity. Let's look at the other table that's going to be created. It's going to create a teams table, and the primary key is team name. By the way, this happened because we annotated team name with key. But we didn't need to annotate player ID with key because, as I said, if you have a column name that is named by the class followed by the word ID, it immediately makes it a primary key. And now this down method can roll back everything. It will drop the key, it will drop the index, and it will drop the tables if you change your mind. Okay? As of this point, if we go to this app data directory and we have a look at it, there is no database that has been created. It's empty. Now what I'd like to do is I want to create some dummy data. It'd be nice to have some dummy data. So I can create a class here, a new class, and let me call it data, no, general, just call it filter by class, and I'll call it dummy data. In this class, I'm going to have some of the methods that's just going to create for me some dummy data. So I'm going to copy from my snippets here. So I want to generate a bunch of teams. Copy this and put it into this class. So here, if you remember, I deleted the salary cap. So we don't need to have a salary cap. So this method is going to create for me 3 teams: the Canucks, Oilers, and the Flames, and their respective cities and provinces. So let me grab the players' data and paste it into my dummy data class. So you remember I changed jersey number to player ID. Now when I'm inserting data, I don't even need to mention the primary key because it's going to be auto-generated. But of course, this player ID is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and I know very well that in hockey there are different numbers. Players, they don't go by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They go by 77, 99, 86, and so on. But let's ignore that for a moment. Let's assume they go, the player IDs are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, okay? For the purposes of making this simpler. Now, salary, I also deleted that. Let's look at our players. We have Sven Barachi, he's with the Canucks. Now, I want you to understand how I'm creating the foreign key for the players. I'm creating a team object representing the foreign key. This method here, get teams, it doesn't have any argument. Whereas get player, I'm passing it as an argument the context. Why am I doing that? Because I want to use that context class to link this particular player with the appropriate team that they belong to. So if you remember link, I'm using a link statement here to say go to the teams collection, find the Canucks, and assign that team name to the team name in the player entity. If I didn't pass the context class to this method, I would not have been able to make that relation. Okay? Now, why am I doing this? Because I want to seed some data into my database. And the place where you seed data is this class called configuration. So let's leave this comment and let me show you how I'm going to seed these entities. I'm going to follow this code that they've given me. So I'm going to say context dot, and you'll notice that there will be the entity teams. I have to create the teams entity before I create the players entity. Why? Because players has a foreign key into teams, so I must create the teams first. So I'm going to say teams dot add or update, and I'll say t new t dot team name, comma, and I'm going to call the dummy data class, which needs to be resolved here, dot get teams dot to array. So what I did was, I'm saying, okay, create this dummy data, and this first argument here is, when you're creating this, ensure that this team name does not get duplicated in the database. We're going to, at this point, save changes. The next collection of information of data that we want to create are the players. So let's go context dot players dot add or update, and I'm going to say player new p dot first name, comma, p dot last name, comma, and then we're going to say dummy data dot get players. Now we don't see get players, and I suspect the reason for that is our get players are not public. Let's make them public, and let's also make them static. Go back in here, and I should find it now. Get players dot to array. So now this get players has a problem because we have to pass the context. If you remember this get players method here, it takes a context. So I forgot about that. Let me pass the context into this method. And at this point, we can, if we want, create some dummy data. We need to get back and execute one more command in the package manager console. So let's look at our migrations.txt. This is the last one that we can execute, and it also wants the fully qualified name of the configuration class. So I'm just going to take this namespace and put it in here. One thing I want to emphasize here is this enable migration is executed only once. Add migration is executed whenever your model changes, and update database can be executed anytime. Let's take this and execute it in the package manager console. It is when this executes that the database gets created and the data gets seeded. Now if we go and look at the app data directory, you will notice that the database got created. Let us show this in our project by clicking on this show all files. I'll insert this. I can include it in the project and then turn this off. Now if I double click on this, you will see the database opening in your Server Explorer here. Let us look at the tables that we have. These tables were automatically created in the database. Let's look at the data. So if I go into Teams and I show table data, I have my teams. Let me look at my, where is it? Server Explorer. Here it is. Let me look at my players. And sure enough, I have my players. Okay? And it's got the correct foreign keys. We know which player belongs to which team. Let us scaffold this. To scaffold it, we would create a new controller. So I'm going to say add controller, and I'm going to use this template here, the MVC controller with views using Entity Framework. I'm going to create two controllers, one for the team and one for the players. So I'm going to add and create a controller based on the team entity, and the data context class would be NHL context. This other database context class is to do with users and members and roles. I'm going to choose the context class that I created and click on Add. Okay, so now we have a Teams controller. Let's do the same thing for players. Add controller, and again we'll choose this one and choose the player entity with the NHL context. Click on Add. Okay, so now we have these two entities, player and teams. Let's just add this into the menu system of MVC. And the way to add it into the menu system is to go into Shared, Layout, and just copy and paste this twice so that we have one for player and the other one for team. So I'm going to say, okay, let this display as team, and the action method would be index, and the controller would be teams. This other button will display as player. The action method is index, and the controller would be players. Up to now, we haven't even executed and run this application. This is the first time we're going to run the application. Let's have a look what it looks like. So I'm going to run it. So we have team and we have player. Let's click on team. Here we are. These are the teams that we have. You probably noticed something incorrect here. And the incorrect thing is that we're not even seeing the team name. Right? It's missing. When it's a primary key, it doesn't like to show it. So we should actually go in here and fix it. I'll just do it for displaying the different teams here. I'll go into the team index here, and let's add another column here. And this would be team name. And in the model, we'll display also team name. Sometimes the scaffolding is not entirely perfect. So now, if I refresh, I should be able to see my team name. And you would have to also fix this for all the others. But we have the Canucks, the Flames, and the Oilers. If I want to create new, when you create new, it actually puts the team name there. Let us say the Senators. The city is Ottawa, and the province is Ontario. So we just added one more team. Let's have a look at the players. And here we go. We've got the players. We don't have the, well, we do have the player first name, last name, but we don't really see their IDs. Again, if you want to display their IDs, you can display it. If this was a jersey number, the jersey number is important for a player. Let us actually display the player ID for these guys. So I'm going to go to players index, and just like I did before, I'm going to display the player ID. So this one here, team model, I think player ID. And down here, do the same thing. And let's refresh. So we have our player IDs. Now let's create a new player. What you should actually appreciate here is this. It didn't give it the correct title here. What this was supposed to be was the team. It's team name, that's fine, but this is like the city. We don't really want to see the city. We probably wanted to see the team name itself. So the way they did this, or the way it was generated, is probably not what you want it to be. Let us change this so that we actually see Canucks, Oilers, Senators, and so on and so forth. So the way to figure this one out is, let's go to controller. For the players, so let me look at the create action method. Create. You see, it is displaying the city. This is the display name, and this is the value. We should actually call it team name. And hopefully that's what it's going to display. Let's go to the view, to the create view. And in the create view, if you look at the drop-down list here, this is the drop-down list. Yeah, it's going to display the team name. I think I fixed it. It's going to show whatever is coming from the view bag. So let's compile here and then refresh the page and see what it's going to give us. Okay, you see now? We're getting the actual team names, not the cities, which is probably what we want. But maybe if there's anything you should appreciate, it is the fact that it created for us a drop-down list. Why did it create a drop-down list? Because it determined that team name is a foreign key into the player's entity, and it automatically converts that into some sort of a lookup table. This in the industry is called a lookup table. Okay, so let's create a new player. And we have John Smith is going to join the Senators. And here we have John Smith joining the Senators. So what have we done so far? We modeled two entities, team, player. We executed migrations, which created the database, and then we scaffolded those entities, and it generated for us the controllers and the views for both player and team. Now the next question is, suppose we want to change the model. Let's go back to our model here, and let's assume that in the team entity we need to put the country, and it wasn't originally in the plan or in our original model. So we want to add string country, because we have players in the US and Canada. We want to distinguish them by country. Because we added a new entity, how do we get the model to update? The way to do that is, let's first compile, and if you look at in my docs folder, I created this migrations. Whenever your model changes, that's when you execute the second command. We're going to execute this migrations, add migration. So I'm going to paste this here. I should have called it a different name. I should have called it, let us say, added country or something. I left it with initial create, and that was my mistake. But let's go back here and see what sort of migration it created. It created another migration called initial create 1. And if you look at that, it detected that only one thing changed. That country was added into the model, into the team's model. And you can see now these two methods, up and down. This is the command that basically adds a column, and this is the one that tears down that column. So now, if I want, I can go into my dummy data, and I can add country to these. Country equals to Canada. So let me just add these to all of them, because they're all in Canada. But let's add one US team, so our neighbors don't think we've ignored them. The team name would be the Sharks, and the city is, help me out here, I think it's Los Angeles, is it?
San Jose.
San Jose, okay. The province is California, and the country is USA. Now, because I want to generate and update the records in the database, I can execute this command here. So let me compile. and then I'll execute this, paste. Data has been seeded. So let's look at the database. So close this, close everything, and then go into the database, Server Explorer. And we did some change in teams. Show table data. So why is it that we have null for the senators? It's because the senators were created not by seeding data. They're created from the controller. But in my seed data, I actually added Canada to the Canadian teams, and I also added USA. So two things really happened. First of all, we got a new column. And second of all, we seeded the row or the data that was in our dummy data class. We seeded that with the appropriate countries. Okay? Now, the next thing I want to do is, I do have another context here called the application DB context. I want to be able to also seed some users and roles in the application DB context. Let me go to my migration text file, and I'm going to draw a line here, and I'll say this is my application DB context. These are the instructions that I will use to create migrations for my application DB context. And these ones here are for my NHL context. I think I called it NHL context. So this application DB context, where is it? The application DB context was given to us when we created this template in Visual Studio. And here it is, this identity model class is got a class called the application DB context. I want to create migrations for that too. So I will follow the same procedure that I used to create the migration for my NHL context. I'm going to copy this, and for enable migration, my context class is application DB context, which is essentially this. And the migration directory, I want to create another folder here called identity under the application, under the migrations directory. So let's copy this. And paste here. You see, it created for me this configuration file down here. In the same place where I have my NHL context, I have another one called the identity context. And it created for me this file. The next step is let me add a migration. By the way, even in this new configuration file, there's a place here where I can actually create users, because this application DB context, it is really connected to our user management part of the template. This is where you create users and passwords and roles and things like that. So I'm going to do the next step, which is add migration. I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to add a migration, and I'm going to call it the initial identity, just to be different. Now this namespace here is the one that's supposed to pertain to the configuration file that I'm dealing with. So I'd have to come here and copy this namespace and put it instead of this. And now I can execute this. And it will create for me another class file here. And notice all the commands here. These are again the commands that are going to create for me all the databases or the database tables that have to do with identity. This is the roles table, the user roles table, the users table, and so on and so forth. Okay? Let's close this for the moment. Now the next step I want to show you is I will get the code for generating seed data. I have here the code for seeding users and their roles. So let me take this code and put it in this identity configuration file, and I'll replace the seed method. I'll delete that seed method and paste this instead of it. So this seed method is going to seed roles and users. So let me resolve all of these missing namespaces. There's probably going to be some more. Okay, I think I've resolved everything. Now, there are two important classes that help us to create roles and users. The first one is this role manager. This role manager class gives us an instance of that manager that allows us to create roles. So with this role manager, I'm going to check. Do I have a role called administrator? In fact, I'm going to shorten it and just call it admin. Do I have a role called admin? If not, then I'm going to create it. The next role that I want to create is guest. Do I have a guest role? No, I don't. Create one. Then the other important class that helps us with this identity management is the user manager. The user manager helps us create users. I created an array of emails here. One is admin@coldmail.com. I'm just going to keep it simple and say a@a.a. And for the guest, I'm going to call it g@g.g. So I have two email addresses here. The first one I'm going to use for administrators, the second one for guests. Now the first thing I'm going to do with this user manager is I'm going to ask, have I got a@a.a? To keep things simple, let us actually take this and put it here. So the code is clear. And I'll get rid of this. Have I got a@a.a? If I don't, then I'm going to create a@a.a as an email, and that same thing is going to be used as our username. By the way, this is what happens in the MVC template. Username and email address are both used as username. Now, I'm going to create a new application user using email and username both a@a.a. So it's going to give me a user object. With this user object, I'm going to create a user and pass it this password. And if this result is successful, then I'm going to take this user and add that user to the admin role, which I had previously created. At this point, I would have created my first user. Now let's create the second user. The second user is g@g.g. Let's put that in this string here. g@g.g. I'm going to search for g at g. And if I don't find that user, I'm going to create the user with email g at g.g and username g at g.g. So I'm going to create an instance of the user, and it is this user manager create that creates the actual user. And if the user has been created successfully, I'm going to add that user to the guest role. So now we have a problem here. Maybe I've got an extra brace. That's what I think I have here. And hopefully it compiles. Now that it compiles, I have my seed method, which means if I call update database, it will create for me these entities in the database and it will seed the data. Let's look again at our database. Our database doesn't have any tables that pertain to the identity framework, which are roles and users. It doesn't have it yet. So now let me execute the update database. So I'm going to snag this. And I'm just going to update the namespace. And then I can copy this and execute it in the package manager console. And now we have the seed method. It has run. You see, if you keep track on what's written down here, it says running seed method, and it's done. So let's go and refresh this. Let us double click on this. And I think if I come here and I say refresh, you see, sure enough, I got more data here, more tables. Let's look at the ASP.NET users table, show table data. You see now, we have these two users. The real test comes when we actually log in to the website using these credentials that were created using seeding. So if I come here and I refresh my website, and I click on login, let me log in as a at a.a. Yep, I was able to log in. Let's see. Let's say never here. And you can see now I've logged in. So those users were actually created in the database. Now let's take this a little bit one step further. Let's say I don't want anybody to enter the team or player controllers unless they are administrators. Okay? So let me go to say, I'll do it for one of them, just the team, just for interest. We'll go to the team controller, and over here I can say authorize, and in bracket I'll say role equals to admin. This actually means that only users with this role are allowed to access the team controller. So let's run this. I'm logged in, so I have to log off. And then if I go to team, so it's going to challenge me. Now, if I try to log in here as the guest, I shouldn't be allowed in. because it's only the admin role that's supposed to go here. So I can go g@g.g and the same password. If I log in, it will simply ignore me. But if I log in as a@a.a, which is an administrator, I should be allowed in. Now, let's take that one step further again. You shouldn't show users links or buttons or menu items that they don't have access to. Because if they see it, they want it. It's better not to show them. So how can you make this team disappear for users who are not admins? The way to do that is to go into the layout where this menu is actually displayed. So if I go to the view, the view is actually in layouts here. Okay. So now I can come here and I don't want them to see teams. So I can go if user is in role here, right here. If user, I think it's like this, if user is in role admin, okay, then show this. So what I'm saying here, if the user who's logged in is in the role admin, then display this menu item. Otherwise, don't show it to them. So let's find out. I'm logged in. Let me log off. You see? That menu item is nowhere to be found. If I log in as the administrator again, it will show up. I think this is probably all that I had in mind to show you today. So I'm going to say good luck and talk to you another time. Thank you very much.